Welcome back, everyone, to Chapter 1, Lesson 3, Rounding Decimals, ladies and gents. Onward we go. First, I'm going to ask you to pause if you'd like. You may go back, check your answers from the previous day. When you're ready, head on back, and we'll continue. All right. Goal for today, rounding decimals. Rounding being the key action word. We're going to round decimals to the nearest whole, to the nearest tenth, or even, yes, ladies and gents, to the nearest penny, the nearest hundredth. Now, you got to take what you previously learned about place value and number lines and use that to round to the nearest whole, tenth, or hundredth. You will need this eventually when you are estimating equations with decimals. You'll need this skill. And so we continue. Go ahead and pause your video if you need. Whatever the date might be, go ahead and write the date in, the hour, page, and numbers. Assignment number 2, rounding decimals. Come on back when you're ready, please. All right, so let's get into a number of examples at this point. Write down what you need, but I would suggest at least one per line. Take a look at the first one. We're going to round to the nearest tens place. Now, interesting with example number 1 that there are no tens. You have no $10 bills. Okay, if I gave you an extra, you'd have one $10 bill. What's right in the middle of that? 5. And where would 4 be? Well, clearly 4 is closer to 0 than to 1, 10. And so we will say that 4 is approximately the same as 0. That is our answer. That at least is the closest tens, mind you. Onward we go. In this case, you might be tempted to say we have 9 tens or 10 tens, but that gets a little confusing. Maybe it would be better for you to realize that we actually would have, if you had no $100 bills, we'd actually have 29 $10 bills. Now, if I gave you an extra, how many would you have then? Well, instead of 29, you'd have 30 $10 bills. Naturally, what is right in the middle of these two numbers? Well, 29 and then another 5, 295. 296, 297 would be right about here. Therefore, 297 is closest to 30 $10 bills. That's our answer rounded. And then we get into the last one. We're going to be asked to round, oh, there it is again, right? So you have to be very careful not to say, look, you have 9 tens or 10 tens, because that just gets a little confusing. Perhaps it would help you to consider that you would actually have 799 $10 bills. Now, if I gave you another one, instead of 799, you would have 800 $10 bills. All right, what's right in the middle of these two quantities? 7,995. Think about 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and there's the next 100 up. All right, we have, in this case, 7,996. And therefore, if you were to round this quantity to the nearest 10, it would be closest to 800 tens, 800 $10 bills. You, of course, can write 8,000 if you wish. Pause the video, rewind if you need. That one takes some thinking. But if you're ready, let's dig into decimals. Now, going to the nearest tenth here, once again, things get a little strange. We have no tenths, no dimes at all. If I gave you another one, well, then you'd have 1 dime. What's right in the middle of no dimes and 1 dime? Well, if you need, put in those extra digits. Think about what's the middle between 0 and 10. Well, that would be 5 pennies. We have 4 pennies, which means if we're rounding this, we're going to write 0 wholes and 0 tenths. Yes, ladies and gents, you need the decimal, you need the 0.0. We'll talk more about significant digits later, but if they ask us to round to the 10th, you need to put a digit in the tens place, and in this case, it is 0. Onward we go. Now we have 9 tenths, or you could say 29 dimes. Think about it. $2.90 would be the same as 29 dimes. If you added another dime, then you would have 30 dimes, or 3 wholes. What's right in the middle of these two quantities? 2 wholes, 95 hundredths. We have 2 wholes and 97 hundredths. So if we were to round this quantity to the nearest tenth, it would be 30 tenths, or 3 wholes and 0 tenths. Last one, sorry I didn't put a number line over here. In this case, we would actually have 799 dimes. That's how many tenths we have right now. If I added another one, then we'd have 800 dimes, 80 wholes. What's right in the middle? If you're struggling, put in those extra 0 values and say, all right, here we go, 79 and 95 hundredths. Now we only have 94 hundredths, which means if we were rounding this quantity to the nearest tenth, it would be 799 tenths, 79 wholes and 9 tenths. Again, pause if you need and rewatch. Or let's go on to the nearest hundreds. Ooh, they almost fooled me. There is no TH at the end of that. So we're talking hundred. Oh, there we go again. There are no $100 bills here. If I gave you one, then you'd have $100 bill. What's right in the middle is 50, and we have 46. So interestingly enough, 46, the closest hundred, is nada, 0. Here, we actually have 9 in the hundreds place. But can I just point out, please, technically you have $3,900 bills. If I gave you another one, you would have 40 $100 bills, 4,000. What's directly in the middle of these? 3,900, you guessed it, 50. Now we have 85, so think about it, 60, 70, 80, 90, we have 85, but I think you can tell already that the closest hundred to this is 40 hundredths. Yes, you may write it as 4,000. After all, that means the same thing. Last but not least, if you wish, pause the video, come on back when you're ready. Now I notice here that we technically have 149 $100 bills. If I gave you another, you'd have 150 $100 bills. And what's right in the middle? 14,950. Meanwhile, we have 14,998, which is awfully, it's almost touching. Nearest hundred would be 150 hundredths, 15,000. And let's wrap up, ladies and gents, with one more set of examples. This could be the most important. Now we're finding and looking at parts. So think about pennies. Anytime you're thinking about hundreds, think about pennies. In this case, we have 46 pennies, 46 hundredths. If I gave you another penny, we'd have 47 pennies. Now, what's right in the middle of this? Once again, if it helps, put in some phantom zeros there. What's in the middle of 460 thousandths and 470 thousandths? Well, that would be 465. If you don't believe it, put in each individual tick mark. 461, 462, 463, 464, 465. 66, 467, 468, 469, and 470. We have 463, which, ladies and gents, as you can tell, is closest to 46 hundredths than it is far closer to 46 hundredths than 47 hundredths. All right. Let's go on to the next example, please. In this case, I was tempted to simply write 49, but I really should write the fact that we have 149 dimes. And if we had another, then it would be 150. I shouldn't say dimes, excuse me, 149 pennies. My apologies. So what is right in the middle of these? Well, we would still have one whole, we would still have 49 hundredths, and then we would have a half of a penny, 5 thousandths. If it's easier to see, put in your phantom zeros. We have 149, and then almost in the middle. So close to being in the middle, but it is just a hair closer to one whole and 49 hundredths. And one more example right here. 3 holes, 98 hundredths. 3 holes, 99 hundredths. Wait a second. Check this out. Put in your phantom zeros. What is right in the middle of those? 3 holes, 985. Which is precisely what we have. Now, I got to tell you, folks, these kind of problems as a mathematics teacher drive me nuts. Because if the question is to round, and rounding says which is it closer to, well, in this case, they're exactly equidistant. In fact, I, as a teacher, would be equally accepting of either answer on a quiz or a test. Now, I know you got this old silly rhyme, 5 or more raise the score, 4 or less let it rest. Those rhymes are there to help little kids with their number sense, but we should understand number. And if our goal is to round this, they're both the same distance away. Either answer should be acceptable. Fair warning, most computer programs like IXL or Khan Academy will count this problem wrong if you round down, which is ludicrous. Computers, of course, do whatever they're programmed to do, so that is just poor programming in my opinion. Now let's take another shot at rounding to the nearest tenths place. At this point, if you would like, you could even pause, try to round each of these to the nearest tenth, and come on back when you're ready to check it. So, be very careful with this. You heard what Mr. Callan said. What's right in the middle? 7 and 45 hundredths. This has 45 hundredths, Mr. No, it doesn't. It has 45 hundredths and then a tiny little part, which means it will not be equidistant. It will be closer to 5 tenths than to 6 tenths. Check out the next one. How many tenths do we have? 83 dimes, 84 dimes. What's right in the middle? 35. Oh, so this one, ladies and gents, could be written either way. Yes, you may write it one way or the other. Next one. 2 and 15 hundredths. Well, right now I'm seeing 21 tenths, 22 tenths. What's right in the middle? There we go again. So in this particular case, you could say 2 and 1/10, or you could say 2 and 2/10. Now let's carry on. What do we have here? 3 holes and 4 tenths. Next dime up is 5 tenths. What's right in the middle? 45. If you need to, put in those phantom zeros. And we have 49. Actually, we have 49 and another 9 parts there. So, ladies and gents, much closer to 3 holes and 5 tenths. Next problem. 6 and 6 tenths. If you added another dime, 6 and 7 tenths. What's right in the middle? We'll still have 6 tenths, and then another half of a dime is 5 pennies. Be careful. You see 65 and you say, oh, could be either answer. I say, no, my friend. It's got a tiny little part of a penny, and therefore it is just a hair closer to 6 and 7 tenths. One more problem on the bottom. 999 dimes. If you added another one, then you would have 1,000 dimes. What's right in the middle? Again, add those little ghost zeros if you need. 99, 95, and we see 95, but it's got a teeny, tiny little part. And therefore, this one should be rounded up to 100 holes and 0 tenths. So I should have done this. Tell you what, let me change this one to blue because I really want you to focus on this. I think that went to disappearing ink. Of course it did. Let's try that again. 2 and 1/10, 2 and 2/10, what's right in the middle? And we have exactly in the middle. So be very careful because even if you see a 5, look, I have 5s all over the place, not there, but there. That doesn't necessarily mean it is exactly in the middle. It really has to be equidistant as these two problems are for you to say there's two possible answers. If you look at the greens, it is just a wee bit closer. And so you should be able to round it appropriately. All right, last note, and then we are going to let you go. I have had students in the past say, Mr. Callan, you're asking us to round this to the nearest 10th, which means, of course, it's not this, but is it okay to write extra zeros? In which I would respond, no, it's not. So why is that? Well, look, if you put that 0, it looks like you're rounding to the hundredths place. If you put more zeros, that would look like you're rounding between 6 and 800 thousandths and 6 and 801 thousandths. You cannot put extra zeros that make it look like you're rounding to the hundredths or to the thousandths or to the 10 thousandths. If it asks you for the tenths place, get to the tenths place and stop. All right, let me give you another example. What if it asks you to round to the nearest hundredth? Pause for a second and think about it. Which one of those is appropriately rounded, rounding this number to the nearest hundredth? Of course, it's not the top, and naturally it's not this. All of those have 49 hundredths, but you cannot put extra zeros. This is the only one that is rounded appropriately to the nearest hundredth. This makes it look like you're rounding not to the hundredths, but that you're rounding to the thousandths place. So do not put those extra zeros in. In other words, you go to the place value that they say, and then you stop. Go to the tenths place and stop. Go to the hundreds place and stop. No extra zeros that make it look like you're rounding even further. All right, folks, that's what I got. You may continue on with your assignment now, whatever date you have. Carry on with problem page 7, numbers 11 to 14, 26 to 29, 41 to 44, 51 to 58. Take care, folks. Do well. And hey, let's keep growing, shall we? See ya.